My name is Bella Monroe and I am 52 years old. If anyone had ever asked me how I imagined the day my daughter graduated from college, I can guarantee I never pictured what happened today. In the cozy private room of an upscale French restaurant in downtown Savannah, the clinking of glassware and bursts of laughter filled the air. Friends and family, around 50 people, had gathered to celebrate Sophia, my only child. The girl with the bright eyes and the smile that made me prouder than anything else in the world. I sat next to Sophia, my heart full of joy, until Chase, my husband of 26 years, stood up. He raised his champagne glass as if about to give a short toast to our daughter. Everyone fell silent, all eyes on him. But instead of words of congratulations, I heard, "I've decided to start a new life without Bella." The room froze instantly, silverware clattered to a stop. A few stunned whispers broke the silence. I heard someone gasp behind me, and me? I just sat there, blinking once. All eyes were on me, waiting for an explosion. Yelling, tears, maybe even a dramatic slap like in the movies. Chase remained standing, his glass trembling slightly in his hand, daring me to react. But I didn't give him the satisfaction. I smiled, a calm, composed smile that made Chase step back half an inch. I gently placed my napkin on the table, stood up, and pulled a cream-colored envelope from my purse. I set it in front of him as casually as if it were the check for dinner. "This is a gift for you," I said, my voice steady and clear enough for everyone to hear. Sophia turned to look at me, her wide eyes brimming with tears. She was still wearing her graduation cap, the pale blue dress we had carefully picked out together just last week, now looking out of place amid the heavy atmosphere. I leaned down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "I'm proud of you. Today is your day. Don't let anyone steal it." And I straightened up and looked around the room. Familiar faces. People who had once come to our house for Christmas dinners, who had once sat around my kitchen table laughing at silly jokes, now avoided my gaze like guilty children caught doing something wrong. Because they knew. They all knew Chase was seeing a woman nearly 20 years younger, a girl named Lauren, who used to call me sis every time she visited. I took a deep breath, put on the most gracious smile I could muster, and said, "Please, everyone, enjoy the rest of the party. Have a wonderful afternoon." Without waiting for a reaction, I turned and walked out of the banquet room. My heels clicked against the marble floor, echoing through the room like a bell in a silent church. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see their faces to know they were watching every step. When the heavy restaurant door slammed shut behind me, I finally allowed myself to exhale. Outside, the June heat of Georgia hit me full force, but I welcomed it. It reminded me that I was alive. I was still standing. Behind me, I heard the door crash open and Chase's voice, no longer confident but frantic. "Vilmelo, what are you doing? Are you crazy?" I walked slowly down the stone steps, a cold smile spreading across my face, one Chase had never seen before. Because over the years I had played the role of the dutiful wife so well that he forgot who I really was, a woman who had once built a career from nothing before giving it up to support his dream. I didn't respond to Chase shouting. I didn't even glance back. I just tightened my grip on my purse, feeling the second envelope inside, a copy of the divorce papers, and the evidence I had so carefully gathered. I still remembered the bitterly cold winter day when everything inside me shifted. It was a January evening when I was reviewing the family's year-end bills. Chase wasn't home, again, with the usual excuse of meeting clients in Hilton Head. I opened the bank statement, planning to skim through it before dinner. But then, a small, unfamiliar charge caught my eye. A jewelry store in Atlanta. I frowned. Chase never wore jewelry, and I hadn't received a gift from him in years. A cold sense of foreboding crept into my heart. I started paying closer attention. More suspicious charges popped up. Dinners at expensive restaurants, unexplained hotel bills, random flight tickets to cities Chase never mentioned. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream or accuse. Instead, I quietly noted everything. Dates, amounts, detail. A week later, I stumbled across Chase's forgotten iPad on the sofa. The screen was still lit and a conversation was open. Lauren. Her name glowed at the top, along with a flood of messages promising a new life, a house by the beach, and nights spent alone together. I closed the iPad with shaking hands, but my mind was clearer than ever. If Chase thought I would go quietly, he had picked the wrong woman. That night when Chase came home, I greeted him with my usual smile, poured him a glass of wine and pretended nothing had changed, but inside I had made up my mind. The next day, I met with Charlotte Reynolds, a divorce attorney I knew from a finance seminar a few years ago. Charlotte was sharp, no-nonsense, and completely discreet. Exactly what I needed. In her sunlit office I laid everything out. The finances, the messages, Chase's behavior, and my gut feelings. Charlotte barely needed to hear half the story before she nodded. "The first thing," she said, "is to check the prenuptial agreement." Pulled out a copy from the home safe. It was a document Chase had insisted on before we married, when I had more assets than he did. I remembered the bitter taste in my mouth when I signed it, but I had never imagined that more than 2 decades later, that same paper would become my shield. Clause 14. If either party was found to have committed adultery during the marriage, the other party would retain the majority of the marital assets, including the house, retirement accounts, and investments. From that moment on, every night, after Chase left for his meetings, I spent hours going over bills, bank transactions, and emails, backing everything up to a private hard drive. I hired a private investigator, Jason, a childhood friend of my brother's, to track Chase when necessary. It didn't take long for Jason to deliver photos of Chase and Lauren holding hands at a beach resort where they had checked in under fake names. I was careful, methodical, treating every move like a chess game. I didn't just want to leave Chase. I wanted him to feel powerless, to taste the betrayal he had so casually inflicted on me over the past year. I gathered enough evidence over 3 months. During that time, Chase kept playing the perfect family man. Dinners with Sophia, sweet talks about retirement dreams. He had no idea that every lie, every glance away, only steeled my resolve. To make sure everything was airtight, Charlotte advised me to wait until after Sophia's graduation. On one hand, I didn't want to ruin my daughter's big day. On the other, I knew Chase would pick that moment to make his move because he cared more about appearances than reality. I prepared the cream-colored envelope filled with Charlotte's carefully drafted documents, the divorce petition, evidence of infidelity, and a detailed list of assets to be divided according to the prenup. I tucked it into my purse this morning. I was ready. All I needed was for Chase to push himself over the edge, and he didn't disappoint me. The sound of Chase's footsteps running after me, his panicked voice calling my name, only strengthened my resolve. With each step, I left behind years of blind loyalty, walking toward a future where I would no longer be chained by betrayal and empty promises. The sound of Chase's shoes pounded urgently on the sidewalk as he chased after me, but I didn't slow down. In my ears I could hear his voice break, furious and panicked with every word. "Bah, you can't do this. Talk to me." I stopped at the corner, beneath the sign of a small flower shop, and turned around. Chase rushed up, clutching the envelope I had left on the banquet table, like it was the only thing that could save him. "What the hell is this?" Chase roared, waving the envelope. I kept my gaze steady, unblinking. "Just giving you what you worked so hard for all this time," I said lightly. He tore the envelope open on the spot, yanking out the stack of papers inside. His face flushed red, then turned pale in a matter of seconds. I could see his hands tremble as he read the first lines. "Evidence of infidelity, how did you get all this?" he whispered, his voice cracking. I crossed my arms and answered simply, "Sometimes, all it takes is one person being careless and the other being patient." Chase jerked his head up, panic flashing in his eyes. You can't use this against me. The prenup expired a long time ago." I smiled, unable to hide the trace of irony. "You should have read it more carefully before you signed. Clause 14 states clearly, it remains valid throughout the marriage. You insisted on it back then, worried about your assets. Now, ironically, it protects me." Chase looked at the file again, crumpling a corner of the paper in his fist as if that could change reality. I didn't look away from his face, watching the familiar smugness shatter piece by piece. "What will I lose?" he asked, almost choking. I tilted my head as if considering the answer, even though I knew every detail by heart. "The house in Savannah. your share of our retirement accounts, and nearly 70% of our joint investments. As for that personal account you thought you hid, I've already had it frozen." Chase stumbled back a step as if he had been struck. "No way," he stammered. "Lauren and we had a plan. The new house, the new life." I cut him off, my voice calm but sharp as steel. "Your new life, Chase, will start from a rented apartment and a frozen bank account." The early summer breeze carried the faint scent of flowers from the shop next door. Amid that peaceful backdrop, Chase looked utterly lost, like a man who realized he had lost everything in a single moment. He clutched the stack of papers tighter, his eyes red. "You're destroying me, Bella," he rasped. "No," I replied, my gaze unwavering. "You've been doing that to yourself for a long time. I'm just letting you deal with the consequences." A taxi pulled up. I raised my hand and flagged it down, not sparing another second for the man frozen like a statue before me. As the car door swung open, I turned back one last time. "Chase," I said, my voice low and final, "I once loved you with my whole life, but you threw it all away for a fleeting fantasy. From now on, you're on your own." I stepped into the taxi and closed the door. As the car pulled away, through the window, I saw Chase standing there alone, holding the crumpled envelope, wearing the bewildered look of a man who had just lost his entire world. Inside me there was no anger, no pain. Only a deep, profound sense of relief, as if I had finally shed a rusted suit of armor I had carried far too long. I knew there was still a long road ahead, the legal battle, the gossip, the curious stares, but I also knew I had reclaimed the most precious thing of all, the right to my own life. I returned to the old house in Savannah's historic district, as the evening light dipped the red brick walls in gold. This house had once symbolized everything we had built together. Or so I had believed. Less than an hour after I walked through the door, I heard a car tear into the driveway. The front door flew open so hard the hinges creaked. Chase stormed in, looking like a lost storm, the crumpled papers still clutched in his hand. "Bella," he shouted, frantic, "we need to talk right now." I remained seated on the living room sofa, the warm yellow lamp light casting soft glows on the family photo wall. I closed my laptop and looked at him without a flicker of emotion. "Sit down," I said, my voice calm as if I were inviting a stranger. But Chase didn't sit. He paced back and forth like a caged animal, tugging at his hair, breathing heavily. You can't do this," he finally burst out, pointing at me as if reaching for some shred of sympathy. "The Midtown apartment Lauren and I were about to rent, they just called and said the lease was denied." "What?" I leaned back into the couch, fingers interlocked calmly. "Because your credit file was flagged," I replied coolly. "Several suspicious transactions triggered a system alert. The brokerage office called our home number to verify," I answered, as any responsible wife would. Chase's eyes widened in shock. He opened his mouth but no words came out. I continued, giving him no time to react. "And that's not all. That personal account you thought you hid so well? It's frozen now under a temporary court order." I smirked. "Congratulations, Chase. You have exactly two options now. Rely on the kindness of others, or start learning how to live humbly." Chase stumbled into the chair across from me, elbows on his knees, burying his head in his hands. It was an image I knew I would remember for a long time. "I just wanted a better life," he mumbled, dazed. "Lauren and we had plans, Bella. We wanted to start fresh." "Then start," I said, my voice gentle but razor sharp. "Start by learning to pay rent yourself, pay your own electric bills, face your own consequences." He looked up, his face flushed red. "You're ruining my life over one mistake." I laughed, a dry, hollow sound without a shred of forgiveness. "Mistake?" I emphasized every word. "Forgetting your wife's birthday is a mistake. Leaving a coat at a restaurant is a mistake. What you did, cheating, hiding money, planning to abandon your family on your daughter's biggest day, that's not a mistake. That's a choice." She stared at me, finally realizing that his usual excuses would find no mercy here. "I need money," he said, as if stating the obvious would fix anything. I crossed my arms, leaning back. You had a secret account. You had Lauren, you had plans, but you don't have me. And you don't have Sophia. Hearing Sophia's name made Chase flinch, as if he had been punched in the chest. Does she know? He asked, his voice breaking. Not yet, I said. But soon. And when she does, you'll be the one explaining why her graduation day turned into a disaster. Chase sat frozen, like the full weight of his mistakes had finally crushed him. I stood, picked up my keys from the table. I'll give you 2 days to pack your things, I said, my voice steady and final. After that, the locks will be changed. You'll need to find another place to start your new life. I walked to the door without looking back. As I closed it behind me, I left him alone with nothing but heavy breathing and a cold silence he no longer knew how to fill. I drove straight to Deanna's house, Chase's sister, the only one in his family who had stayed loyal to me. Her small house with pale blue shingles sat quietly under giant oak trees, just outside downtown. When I arrived, she was already waiting on the porch, her face tight with worry. Are you okay? Diana asked as soon as I stepped out of the car. Better than you think, I said with a strained smile. Diana hugged me tightly, without needing to ask anything more. In that moment, I knew I had found the right place to regroup. Sophia would join me here later that night, after celebrating with her friends. I had texted her, assuring her that everything would be okay, that she just needed to trust me. We were sitting in the living room sipping mint tea when the doorbell rang urgently, shattering the calm. Diana gave me a sharp look, then set her cup down and went to answer it. Heavy footsteps echoed across the hardwood floor. Chase and Lauren stepped inside. 2 storms moving in opposite directions. Chase looked wrecked, hollow-eyed, while Lauren, her blonde hair curled neatly, expensive dress clinging awkwardly, barely dared to lift her head. I stayed seated, waiting. Bella, Chase began, his voice strained with forced control. We need to talk. We've talked enough, I replied coolly. Lauren shifted nervously beside him, her eyes darting around. Clearly she hadn't expected this. Chase turned toward Deanna, as if seeking an ally, but she crossed her arms and blocked the entrance to the living room, refusing to let them come any further. At that exact moment, Sophia entered from the back door, still in her navy graduation dress, her high heels dusted with dirt. Seeing the scene before her, she froze, her eyes blazing with fury. What are you doing here, Dad? Sophia demanded, her voice sharper than I had ever heard before. Dad, I just wanted to explain everything. Chase stepped forward, but Sophia raised her hand to stop him. Explain what? She snapped. Explain why you turned my graduation day into a disaster, or why you betrayed Mom and tried to grab everything you could. Chase froze, his lips pressed into a tight line. Lauren touched his arm as if trying to pull him back, but he shook his head. I made mistakes, Chase choked out, his voice trembling. But I'm still your father, Sophia. She looked at him, her eyes brimming with disappointment. Don't use father to excuse what you did, Sophia said. If you had truly cared about family, you wouldn't have chosen betrayal today of all days. The air grew thick. Chase turned to Lauren, searching for agreement, but Lauren had already stepped back, her gaze shifting from embarrassed to doubtful. That money Chase promised to invest in our new apartment, Lauren stammered. You said it was transferred already. But I just called the bank. The account is frozen, so it was all just empty promises? Chase turned away, avoiding her eyes. I stayed seated, needing no more words. Lauren looked around the room, then back at Chase. The realization shattered across her face like a cracked mirror. What else are you hiding from me? She asked, her voice breaking. Chase said nothing. And in that silence, Lauren understood she had bet her future on a losing hand. I was such a fool, Lauren whispered, her voice trembling, before turning and rushing out the door without waiting for Chase to say another word. The door slammed shut, echoing through the house. Sophia watched Lauren leave, then turned back to Chase, her expression full of both sorrow and disappointment. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you, she said, her voice low and tired. But right now, I just want you to leave. Chase opened his mouth to say something but then just nodded. He walked slowly toward the door, his shoulders heavy like a man who had lost everything he once took for granted. When the door closed again, Diana placed a hand on my shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. Sophia came and sat down beside me, resting her head against my shoulder like she used to when she was little. None of us said anything, we didn't need to. The silence was no longer heavy. It was the beginning of something new. A chance to rebuild from the wreckage we never thought could be repaired. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning at a small, historic courthouse in Chatham County. The Savannah sky that day was heavy and gray, with low clouds mirroring the somber mood of those about to step into a relentless legal battle. I arrived with my lawyer, Charlotte Reynolds, the sharp, silver-haired woman whose steady gaze never faltered against any opponent. Chase showed up too, accompanied by a young lawyer I had never seen before. A boy who looked fresh out of law school, awkwardly clutching a thick stack of files. Charlotte gave me a quick glance, her mouth curling into a faint smirk. "Don't worry," she whispered, "he's no match." We took our seats at the plaintiff's table while Chase sat opposite us, looking nothing like the confident man who had once walked into my life 26 years ago. He avoided my eyes, fidgeting with the worn strap of his watch. The judge, a stern-looking older woman, entered and called for opening statement. Charlotte began by laying it all out. The prenuptial agreement remained valid, Chase had breached the fidelity clause, and it was necessary to freeze the marital assets to ensure fairness during the upcoming division. Chase's lawyer stood, his face pale. "Your Honor," he began, his voice slightly shaky, "we argue that the prenup has expired over time due to lack of specific renewal terms." The judge raised an eyebrow and flipped through the file. Clause 17 clearly states, "The agreement shall remain in effect throughout the marriage and any dissolution proceedings. No expiration is indicated." She closed the file with a sharp thud, making the entire courtroom fall silent. "The court finds the prenuptial agreement valid. The plaintiff has provided sufficient evidence of a serious breach of fidelity. Marital assets will remain frozen throughout the case," she declared firmly. I glanced over at Chase. He slumped in his seat, looking utterly drained. The judge continued regarding residence. "The plaintiff, Mrs. Bella Monroe, shall have temporary exclusive use and management of the marital home until a final ruling is issued. The defendant shall have access only to his personal account, limited to essential living expenses." Chase's lawyer tried to object, but the judge raised her hand to silence him. "I have reviewed the transaction records, personal spending, and evidence of financial misconduct. This decision is necessary to protect the plaintiff from further loss." Charlotte smiled faintly, as if she had anticipated every move. After the temporary rulings were announced, the judge adjourned the hearing. The official trial would take place within 60 days. I rose, gathering my papers neatly while Chase remained frozen in his seat. As I stepped out of the courtroom, I heard his hesitant footsteps following me down the empty hallway. "Bella, please," he finally croaked. "We once loved each other." I turned, meeting the eyes that had once convinced me nothing could ever tear us apart. Now they were filled only with regret. "I loved you, Chase, but I love myself, too. And that love doesn't allow me to forgive betrayal," I said, my voice calm, free of anger or bitterness. Chase stared at me, his mouth moving as if searching for words, but none came. He simply lowered his head, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his own poor choices. I turned away, walking down the hall with a strange sense of peace. Outside, a soft rain fell onto the cobblestone streets, as if washing away the remnants of a life I no longer belonged to. News of our divorce spread through our social circle like wildfire. Within weeks, whispered gossip at gatherings turned into undeniable truth. Chase Monroe, once so proud of his success, had become a hollow shadow of himself. Not long after the hearing, I heard Lauren had left Chase. She packed her things and moved out of the temporary apartment Chase had struggled to maintain under the financial strain. A mutual friend later told me that one night at a bar, Lauren had muttered, "I didn't sign up to love a broke man." The small company Chase had boasted he would build into an empire quickly crumbled. With no financial skills and no one left to back him, bad investments drained what little he had left. Within 3 months, his office had a "for lease" sign, and the company website was under maintenance. Friends who once toasted with him at every event disappeared. No more golf outings, no more charity galas. Some acquaintances cautiously reached out to me, but I politely declined. I didn't need them. And they had never really needed me. While Chase floundered in the wreckage of his own making, I quietly rebuilt my life, starting from the smallest things. I enrolled in a short financial counseling course for women at a local university, brushing up on my skills and regaining my professional rhythm. I rented a small office in a historic downtown Savannah building, its large windows overlooking a sunlit park. On the window I placed a simple sign, Bella Monroe Financial Transitions. I chose that name because I knew exactly what I wanted, to help women navigate major life changes, divorce, widowhood, job loss, career shifts. I had once wished someone had held my hand through my darkest days. Now I wanted to be that person for others. My first client was a middle-aged woman who had just lost her husband after 30 years of marriage. She sat across from me, clutching a tissue, her voice trembling, as she admitted her fear of losing financial control. "I don't even know where to start," she whispered. I smiled gently, placing my hand on the file in front of me. "We'll start right where you are," I said, "one step at a time, and you won't have to walk it alone." Words spread quickly. One client led to another. Divorce attorneys, therapists, even people who had only known me through gossip began referring clients my way. Within 6 months I hired an assistant, then a partner. One day, while sorting through paperwork in my office, I stumbled upon an old photo. Me, Chase, and Sophia, standing in front of our house during our first summer there. I stared at it for a long time. There was no anger, no regret, just a strange, quiet peace. Life wasn't the same, and neither was I. I was no longer the woman waiting anxiously for a husband to come home, no longer the woman who forgot her own dreams just to keep up appearances. On a late afternoon, with the cobblestone streets bathed in the pink glow of sunset, Sophia stopped by the office. She had just started her new job in Charleston, but often came home on weekends to visit. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," Sophia said, hugging me tightly. I smiled, feeling a quiet happiness settle deep inside, a happiness as solid and enduring as the old stones that lined the streets where I had found my way back to myself. Chase had chosen his path, and I had chosen mine. The final divorce trial was held on a cool early fall morning. I entered the courtroom with Charlotte, wearing a simple light gray dress and feeling more at peace than ever. All summer long, I had prepared for this moment, not just to win, but to close this chapter with every ounce of pride still left in me. Across the courtroom, Chase sat with a new lawyer, this time an older, more seasoned man. But Chase himself looked utterly drained. His suit seemed loose on his now much thinner frame. The judge, the same one who had presided over the preliminary hearing, entered the courtroom, her sharp eyes sweeping across the room before she began. "The case of Mrs. Bella Monroe versus Mr. Charles Monroe," she announced crisply. Charlotte stood and laid out all the evidence. Chase's breach of the prenuptial agreement, the hidden assets, and the misuse of joint funds for personal purposes over an extended period. Transaction records, messages, photographs, everything was meticulously organized, leaving no room for dispute. Chase's side had little to argue. They merely attempted to appeal for leniency, tossing around vague phrases about their shared history and Chase's emotional contributions to the family. When it was my turn to speak, I rose, holding my head high. "For more than 20 years, I said firmly. "I invested all my strength, time, and trust into this family. I didn't just raise our child and manage our home, I also shouldered every financial responsibility when my husband failed. What I ask for today is not revenge. I am reclaiming what I built and what I rightfully deserve." The room fell silent after my words. Even Chase had no argument left. He simply stared at the floor, his fists clenched as if trying to contain something inside. Finally, after 3 tense hours, the judge delivered the verdict. Given the clear evidence of a violation of the prenuptial agreement, the court awards Mrs. Bella Monroe full ownership of the marital home in Savannah, retains her individual retirement accounts, and grants her 70% of the joint assets, including investments and savings. Mr. Charles Monroe shall retain only his personal property and the balance in his designated private account. I took a deep breath as I heard those words, not because I was celebrating a win, but because I finally felt the weight lifting off me. Chase remained motionless, as if frozen in place. I glanced at him one last time, feeling no hatred, only regret, for a man who had lost everything because of his own poor choices. As I stepped out of the courthouse, the gentle autumn sunlight wrapped around me like a warm embrace. Charlotte gave my back a light pat. "Congratulations, Bella," she said, a fleeting smile at the corner of her lips. "You didn't just win assets, you reclaimed your future." I simply nodded. In that moment, I understood. Life isn't always fair, but if you stand firm for your worth, there will come a day when justice smiles. That day, I didn't go home immediately. I drove straight to my office. The small space I had rented and nurtured through all those difficult months. Inside, the desk was neatly organized and the sign reading Bella Monroe Financial Transitions gleamed in the sunlight. A silent reminder. I had risen from the ashes and built a new world with my own hands. Chase lost almost everything in the divorce, but the greatest loss wasn't money or property. It was the trust, the respect from family and friends, and above all, from his own daughter. As for me, I didn't just reclaim my life, I rediscovered myself. Stronger, freer, and no longer defined by anyone else. I looked out through the large window, watching the autumn leaves swirl in the breeze like a graceful dance. An old chapter had finally closed. About a month after the final hearing, one late afternoon while I was wrapping up paperwork at the office, the phone rang. The caller ID made me pause for a moment. Chase. I let it ring a few more times before picking up. "Ella." His voice was raspy and worn. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but please, give me just a minute." I leaned back in my chair, feeling strangely empty inside. "Go ahead," I said curtly. "Well, still there." There was a long pause as if he was searching for the right words. "I ruined everything," he finally said, his voice heavy. "I lost you. Lost our daughter. Lost my own self-respect. I have nothing left but regret." I closed my eyes for a moment. A part of me had longed to hear this apology, but now, hearing it, I felt only relief. No more pain, no more anger, just a sense of closure. "I know," I replied calmly. Chase hesitated, then added, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to know if there's any chance left for us. I'll change, I'll start over." I opened my eyes and looked out at the street, bathed in the golden hue of sunset. And I knew my answer. "No, Chase," I said, my voice soft but firm. "That door closed a long time ago. I'm no longer standing there waiting to open it." Chase fell silent for a long time. I could hear the collapse in his heavy breathing. "You deserve better," he finally said, and for the first time, I believed he truly meant it. I hung up the phone, feeling no ripple in my heart. The old story had truly ended. My life moved into a new chapter I hadn't even dared to imagine. My small office grew quickly, forcing me to rent a larger space within just 8 months. Clients kept coming. Women who had been knocked down by life, now sitting across from me with hope in their eyes. I didn't just help them manage money. I listened to their stories, guided them to plan for a future they once thought was lost. I became their steady hand, the kind of hand I once wished for during my own darkest days. Sophia, my daughter, called regularly from Charleston. She had just been promoted to lead the communications team at her company, and in every call I could hear the uncontainable pride in her voice. "You're my role model, Mom," Sophia had whispered one evening when we sat on the porch sipping tea. "Not because you survived it all, but because you turned your loss into your strength." Those words, more than any financial success, were the greatest reward I could have ever received. One weekend, I treated myself to a trip to Asheville, up in the mountains, where the autumn leaves painted the hills in brilliant reds, golds, and oranges. Standing on the balcony of a cozy little homestay, overlooking the vibrant valley, I felt my heart open wide and completely at peace. I once thought happiness meant keeping a family intact at all costs. But now, I understood true happiness begins when you choose yourself, even if it costs you every old dream. Bella Monroe, who once lived in the shadow of a man, had stepped into the light, writing her own story with no one's approval needed. I walked back inside, opened my laptop, and began drafting a plan for a new program, a series of free workshops on financial management after divorce for women in the community. Because I knew there were women out there who needed a hand, a voice telling them you are stronger than you think. And this time, I would be that voice. Bella's story is a powerful testament to the strength of rebuilding after betrayal, From a woman who sacrificed everything for her family, she rose again after heartbreaking betrayal, reclaiming her life with perseverance, dignity, and wisdom. She shows us that loss is not the end, but the beginning of a freer, happier journey. What do you think about Bella's powerful journey? Would you choose to walk away or forgive in her situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories.